As a 6-year-old in a hospital being bombed in war-torn Lebanon, Marianne made peace with death. Today, she's a single mom, her son has cerebral palsy, and yet she leads a 150,000 member founders organization. If you think you've got it hard, you need to listen to this. Welcome to the Operator's Code. Mariane Bekker, thank you very much for joining the podcast. I know that you are the head of Founders Bay, and you're also the head of investor relations at u.com. That's a lot on your plate at one time. And I know from our earlier conversations that you have children, that you're also a mother. So how do you navigate and manage all those major vectors in your life and achieve balance?
Yeah, so it's not easy. And I would say my life definitely does not have balance because I'm also a single mom and my little one has a disability. My 5-year old, he has cerebral palsy. I work a lot. So, like yesterday, for example, that was my day. I woke up early in the morning, I took care of the kids. And then while I was driving my kids to school, I had my first meeting. Then I dropped them to school, and then I had nonstop meetings where I didn't have time to eat. Then I went to host an event with U.com and Founders Bay, and then I hosted a dinner with you, and then I came back home at 11:30, and then I worked and I slept and all over again. So it's multitasking at its best. So while in meetings, I do some of the work, but also I'm very grateful to have an amazing team. So at Founders Bay, I have a big team supporting me. My community lead takes care of all the event planning, all the workshop planning. My EA takes care of all the organizing. And then at U.com, we hire the best of the best. So we have a team of 100 people and we're all supporting each other. So I feel very lucky to have support around me.
That's great that you got the support at each of your major, let's call them business type activities. But what about at home? I mean, what support do you have to help you manage? I mean, my wife doesn't work and she stays busy all day long. And I know she's busy all day long. And we only have one child. So, how do you manage all that?
Yeah, so I am lucky that my parents live close by. So my mom helps a lot with the kids and my dad as well. So they're there to support me. And I feel very grateful for them. I feel like if it wasn't for my parents, I couldn't have done it. And my ex husband also takes the kids half the time. So I feel like I have a good support system around me.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that support system, your family, and how you grew up, and what kinds of experiences that you went through that gave you the emotional stability, the strength, the intellectual grit to do what you're doing alone on your own.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in a little country called Lebanon. There's less than 1 million people, but I grew up in a civil war. So we were born in like we are Christians, and there was a civil war between Christians and Muslims. So basically, the first few years of my life, I remember being in bomb shelters. I remember hearing strikes everywhere. I remember being extremely sick from the bomb pollution. People don't realize when there's bomb, there's a lot of pollution. So kept getting pneumonia and kept ending up in the hospital. But then they were bombing hospitals. So I remember just always there, being there, praying that they would not bomb the hospital. And I remember when I was very, very young, one night when I was at the hospital, my parents had left because at that time they didn't allow people to stay because of the war. And then I opened the TV and the news was, oh, okay, they're bombing hospital, they're bombing electrical grids, and there was an electrical grid right next to my hospital. And I started hearing more the helicopters above me. And I thought to myself that this was it. Like, this is the night that I die, it's okay. And I realized that when I was this young, that what is the worst case? The worst case is that I die. The worst case is my family is still safe. Hopefully, they are in the bunkers. And it's okay because I lived, even if it was short time, I lived an okay life. I was grateful to have like a family that loved me. So I remember that I made peace with death when I was young. And I think just having that experience made me realize that now what is the worst case that happens, right? Like, let's say I fail in my life. Let's say I take those risks and I fail. It's okay because I'm grateful for the life that I had. So that gave me the resilience to kind of do hard things. It gave me the resilience to go through life and just continue being happy because every day I wake up and I'm like, what am I grateful for? Right? We all, like, relatively, whether you live in war, whether you have bad circumstances, there is hard moments, but there's also things in your life that are happy. There's things in your life that brings you joy. And I think like living in the present and finding those just gives you the perspective and the resilience to go through the hard times that you're going through.
You mentioned a number of things, this idea of gratitude, this idea of living in the present, this acceptance of, you can only control essentially what you can control.
Exactly.
So your perception about whether something is good or bad has an enormous impact on the outcomes in your life.
Exactly.
And if you're a person that has a tendency to see always the glass is half empty, the outcomes in your life are framed in a way such that the best case scenario is that the damage is minimized rather than when the glass is half full, you're always looking to optimize opportunity. And there's
Exactly.
a huge difference in the way you approach these problems. How old were you exactly when this was all going on? Do you
So
recall?
I it was all hazy to me, but so I was in Lebanon like on and off until I was like 6, 7 years old. But that moment at the hospital, like I remember like it was yesterday. It just had a big impact on my life because even until now, like I can't hear helicopters before without having a panic attack, to be honest. Like I can't. Because I think that they're gonna come and bomb the place.
Mm.
But, I think you're right, like, in that hospital room, I remember, like, having the IV in my arm. I remember the television playing, like, I remember like it was yesterday, and I think, like you said, I realized that you can only control what you can control, and you can't control what you can't control. So what's the point of being scared? What's the point of worrying and being stressed out? Things are gonna happen anyways, right? Not everything is under your control, so, like, you gotta be like a river, just flow through life wherever it takes you, know that you have yourself to rely on and know that you can get yourself out of situations, and
Mm.
worrying about it will not help anything.
I could get very philosophical. There's a romantic writer named Hermann Hesse who had a book called Siddhartha, and basically the whole book was around having a being on the river and being willing to accept where the river takes you. But a good riverman doesn't worry about that because they can always navigate the boat to one side or the other if they need to.
Right.
But again, that's a function of understanding the river or the flow of life, if you will, and that you're accepting that there are going to be things that you don't control. The only thing you can't control, it's very stoic, this notion that you can't control everything happening around you. All you can control is your reaction to it. And that's largely driven by the framework you use intellectually and emotionally because they're tied. I mean, you can't separate them 100%. They're tied together of how you accept and then move forward with the situation that you're living in, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's anybody can sit around and complain about, well, this is awful that this happened. Okay, great, it happened. But sitting around moping about it isn't going to help you move forward, solve the problem, and move forward with it. And so that's, I think, an important thing. The other thing that you mentioned was this idea of essentially choosing to be happy. Happiness is not a destination, right?
Mhm.
Happiness is a choice. And the fact that you mentioned that you had gratitude, that even though your life was short, you had gratitude for the life you had. And you're talking about a little girl
Mhm.
who had pneumonia a bunch of time, who's grown up in a civil war torn country, and it's difficult for me to see that and somebody accepting that I've had a good life, and that you've got so many young people today that feel like, well, I'm born here in the United States, but things aren't fair. There's all this oppression, theoretically oppression in this country, or there's things that interest rates are too high, and it's all really based on a frame of reference that is very, very narrow. It's like you don't look at this little girl here who grew up in Lebanon in a civil war, and she said her life was good,
Yeah.
that she had family that supported and loved her. How do you reconcile those two things, right?
Y Yeah, I don't know, because if I think about my childhood, I think even though there was war around me all the time and I remember like the war bunkers, I was still like playing with my friends outside with the bike, right? I still had tons of family like celebrations. I still had like the love of my neighborhood and my community. So I still felt like it was even though it was difficult, it was a relatively happy childhood. I think it's because when you grow up in war, when you grow up in these circumstances, it's just normal to you. It's not something that's shocking. It's not something that's unique. It's like, oh yeah, I have to just watch out when I'm outside with my bike, that if there is like if I hear something, to just go back inside, right? Or if I'm at school, if they tell you, okay, now is the time to go and to hide, you just have to do it. But because I didn't know anything else, it was just normal for me growing up in those circumstances.
I guess likewise, you could say the same thing for young people growing up today in the
Exac-
United States. They don't know anything other than abundance. And I order something from Amazon and it can arrive today.
Exactly.
It's an amazing, shift in frame of reference that, and it's difficult to have gratitude for that because again, it becomes normalized. It's just, oh, that's the way it is.
Exactly, and I could tell you a little bit of a story. So I went to Burning Man, in August for the first time, right? And in Burning Man, it's very rough conditions. Like there is no running water, there's no electricity, and people are like, "Marianne, are you freaking out?" And I'm like, "No, because I felt like we had more water and more electricity than I was growing up. This is like nothing for me. I was able to get
Yeah.
used to it within like 10 minutes." I'm
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I remember growing up, like, when we were growing up in Lebanon, because water was not something that we had abundance of, you actually had to call a truck to come and bring water and store it in these, like, outdoors pipes that you had, like,
Mhm.
outdoors, and so I remember
Cisterns, like a
yeah,
cistern. Yeah.
exactly, and a lot of the time they would be dry, so, every day you had half a bucket of water that you could use, and my parents had to take that and they had to boil it to make sure it's sterilized, that then we can drink with it, but then that's how you would take a shower. So you would go in the bathtub, you couldn't open the water, you had to go and take a shower from this, like, half a gallon of, and my parents made sure that we were always clean. So, like, this experience just teaches you that, okay, you can live without electricity, you can live without water, and you can be okay. So it's all like perspective at the end.
So let's quickly circle back because we're almost living through something similar to what you went through in the 90s, where what's going on geopolitically in the world today, obviously, I'm sure you're aware that things with Israel and southern Lebanon right now. Do you have family still there that you worry about and think about?
Yeah, all the time. I have my cousin, she just gave birth to her third child. She gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. And then she has two young kids, and I worry about them all the time. My cousin is just like the most amazing woman that you can meet, always has a good heart and helping her like community. I have my aunt who is getting a little bit older. I have multiple cousins, multiple aunts, and I worry about them all the time because, like, during one of the wars, I did have a family member that unfortunately died because of the bombings and the explosion. So it's not an easy thing knowing that you have family there, knowing that you have loved ones that are experiencing that right now and that you can't do anything about it.
Mm, yeah, and they're doing okay. They're stiff upper lip. They've got their chins up. They're living their life and
Yeah.
living with gratitude.
I think they are, like, I remember when another episode was happening, my brother went to Lebanon, and he was like, "Oh, people are still partying in the street." It's just becomes part of your normal when you're going through difficult times. It becomes part of your normal, and then people realize that yeah, we can stay home, we can be worried, but then you can't live a full life doing that. So people like it changes their perspective where listen, if something is going to happen, if a bomb is going to explode, it's going to explode anyways, might as well live my life. So people are still going out, they're still like meeting, they're still going with community, cuz like in our culture, in the Lebanese culture, we're very social. We understand that life, we're not meant to live it alone. So we still want to go with family, we still want to go with the neighbors. So they're still going out and living their life and just realizing that they can't control the outcome regardless of what happens. So might as well live the best life that they can live. So it really puts
That's a very healthy mindset, a very healthy perspective that,
exactly.
there's a study that's been done. I can't cite it all, but it's people actually spend more time worrying about things that ultimately never happen than they do about what's actually really happening in their life.
Yeah, they spend
And
more time worrying
what
about
a waste.
things than
What a waste of intellectual energy and emotional strength.
exactly.
So that's a very healthy life perspective. And I want to come back to that at some later point in our conversation. So you grew up in your early childhood in Lebanon. How did you get to where you are today in the United States?
Yeah, so my mom was a like is a very strong woman. So one night when our building got bombed and we barely made it alive, she went to the Canadian embassy and then she literally refused to leave the embassy until they gave her the visa to get us out of there. So we got the visa to get out of Lebanon. We came to Canada. We only got the visa for unfortunately, they were, like, prioritizing, women and children, so it was only me and my mom and my brother, like, who were able to go in there. My dad had to be left behind until a few months later where he could join us, but then I grew up in the I would say, like, an Arabic neighborhood in Montreal, Canada, but it was we were very poor, like, when you come from war, you don't have assets, right? Even though my dad is extremely educated and he was even a dean of engineering in Lebanon, and my mom was also very educated and she was a librarian at her university, and it was a renowned university. You still the money and the currency don't mean anything, right, when you're from war torn country. So when we arrived, we were living with like two other families in a small place. We had to get donation to get clothes because we didn't have clothes we came with. And then I remember like the public school that we went to, a lot of the kids were also from the war, and our school was so poor. Like the kids didn't have things to eat that they had to implement an emergency program to give us breakfast so that the kid could focus in class so they wouldn't be hungry. So even though we went to Canada, right, like we still lived in poverty for a while until like my dad joined us, until a family member helped him get his job in engineering and we started like getting some income.
Wow. So I guess the example of your parents was also pretty seminal in your, emotional and intellectual evolution, just watching them carry on.
Of course. Of course, and
Wow.
my dad is highly educated, so the story of my dad is actually pretty incredible. So he was born in Lebanon also during the war, but he studied and he focused on his study ever since he was a child so that he could provide his family a better life. He got straight A's everywhere, so he got a full scholarship to go and study in the US. So he actually went and he did his bachelor and his master in electrical engineering in Georgia Tech, which is a very renowned like engineering college in the US. But
Mhm.
then when he graduated, he didn't want to leave his family behind. He didn't want to leave his community behind. So he actually went back to Lebanon during the war to really, whatever he learned, to go and give back to his community, give back to his family. And he became the dean of engineering. He started a company during the war. He became an entrepreneur that was doing well. So like my dad always inspired me to not only think about yourself, because he could have easily stayed in the US, right? He didn't have to go back. He could have had an amazing life there. But he chose community. He chose to come back and give back to the world. And that sense of giving back is something that I will always carry with me because of him.
So you're in Canada. You're in elementary school, I imagine at this point, so third grade, fourth grade, something
Exactly.
like that.
Yes.
Um, let's move on from there. How did you? Because you're now living in the Bay Area. You obviously completed a fairly high degree of education. So let's walk through that and bring us up to date on to where you are today.
Definitely. So in Canada, I focused on my studies since I was very young, especially I excelled at math, so I went to study software engineering, inspired by my dad, who brought that love to technology to me. I studied software engineering at McGill, and then me and my ex-husband at that point we met in college, and then we moved to the Bay Area because we were both engineers and we wanted to grow our careers in Silicon Valley. So I made my way through Silicon Valley. I found my first job. It was around 2010 when things were just starting to recover from the last recession. But I was lucky enough to be at startups that did well, ended up being at companies that exited, and then became a director of engineering. So after being a director of engineering, when I had my second child, Liam, he's amazing. He is like the love of my life. He is just a fireball of energy and I love him so, so much. But he when he was 1 year old, unfortunately, he wasn't moving the same way as other kids. And then we learned that he had cerebral palsy. So we learned that we had to just spend a lot of time one diagnosing him, figuring out his therapy. And at that point, I couldn't sustain my full-time job as a director of engineering. I wanted to focus on my kids, so I left to take care of him. And when I left, I remember the first day I was changing diaper, the second day, I'm like, you know what? I still had this history. I worked really hard to get educated. I really care about empowering women around me. So I started a company to help companies hire more women engineers. And that kind of started my journey in entrepreneurship and into building Founders Bay into what it is now.
And how big is Founders Bay now? Again, just tell us
Yes.
what it's all
So
about.
Founders Bay, we're 150,000 founders, VCs, and operators in the Bay Area. But really, everything prepared me for this moment because we have a very strong community. We're there for each other, whatever we need. We do weekly events. We did over 400 events in the last 2 years. And we're really like bringing the community together. People are there to help them, whatever you need in your startup journey, we're there for you. And I feel very, um, yeah, lucky to have such an amazing community and to have like the entire Bay Area rally for us. And now we're quickly becoming the fastest growing startup community and probably the largest at this point in Silicon Valley, and if not in the world.
Wow, that's also a great story of giving back.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it gets us back full circle to this notion of giving back to your community, giving back something back to the world, if you will. So let's talk a little bit about your other thing you're doing, the u.com. What's going on there?
Yeah. So you.com is incredible. So I so this is it, right? Like I used to be director of engineering. I love technology, right? That's my passion in life. So I didn't want to give that up. Like I love building Founders Bay. But now that my son, he's finally 5, we got him to walk. He exceeded a lot of the odds, and he walked into kindergarten. I went back to corporate. I went back to my first love, which is technology. So basically, at U.com, we are building at the edge of AI, which is super exciting because our founders are the one who invented prompt engineering. So basically, we are providing you with the infrastructure to build your agent, to have an agent that's accurate, to have agentic workflows that can work in production and can scale with your company. So I absolutely love my job because like you get to be in the latest trend. I learned so much in the last 6 months about like the industry, and I get to talk about it and also build community. Like we over the last few months with you.com, we hosted probably 15 events as well, and we're still giving back to the community. We brought developers together, we brought CTOs together, and we just did our first event in New York where we brought 100 of the top engineers in one place with the CTO of McKinsey, and we talked about the latest trends that are happening. And we're doing it again on Thursday and next week. So it's also with my role, we're able to give back to the developer community, and we're also doing a lot of like open source initiatives to give back to that community as well. So it's a continuation of what I've been doing.
Wow. Okay. Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
What would the 6-year-old little girl or 8-year-old little girl sitting in that hospital room be thinking of the woman that you've become today?
Yeah, I think it's, you know what? Like I try to talk to that little girl sometimes because I still have like moments of doubt. I think that little girl, she's just happy to honestly, like, she's just happy, not for me. She's just happy that my family is healthy. She's happy that my family is still there and helping her. And I think that little girl realized, like, very early on that, like, life is not only for you, right? Like, this is when I was praying, I wasn't praying for me. I was just like being grateful that my family is happy, that my community is happy. And life is so short that it's not about her, it's not about me, it's about like the impact that you can have. And I feel so grateful that through Founders Bay, we were able to support over 500 women founders. We were able to bring more visibility to them. And I think she would be happy that our life has been well lived because we were able to give back. And now we're doing a lot. I'm just, you know what? At the end of the day, I'm also very grateful for my kids. I'm so grateful that my son got to walk. And I hope that he continues being able to walk. I hope he continues get making this ability. And I hope that he sees a world where even though he is different from others, even though he can't walk as well, even though he will have challenges, he can still have the same opportunities to succeed. So I'm hoping that that little girl just recognizes that and that she's, yeah, it's hard to talk about.
Mhm. Your family gives you a lot of strength, I think. And so he's fortunate that he comes from a family that has overcome a great deal of adversity already in their life. And this is just another chapter of, let's face it, adversity is a feature of life, it is not an exception. We're all going to, you mentioned it earlier, we're all going to face and be required to overcome adversity in our life. Now, it's going to look different for you than it does for me or anybody else that might be listening to this, but recognize that adversity is a feature, it is not an exception.
Exactly.
And it's amazing that you have such a positive attitude given the fact that you do have a child with special needs, that but it's still you've got a very positive view of how you're navigating it, and that has a huge impact on him because he's not absorbing the negative energy that he's limited
Exactly.
just because of his adversity. That adversity, that overcoming of adversity actually can provide tremendous strength of will. And let's face it, in my opinion, you could be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't have the will to overcome, you won't. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how physically gifted if you are. If you don't have the self-discipline and the will to achieve, you won't. And that's so So much of life's success is about just how you frame the world you see around you, how you accept it and internalize it, and then how you decide, how you choose to move forward. It can be positive or negative, but either choice you make, you're going to be right. Right? If you see it negatively, you're going to get negative outcomes. If you
Yeah.
see it positively, you're going to get positive outcomes. So, well, let's talk a little bit about this idea of AI and what it does for us as the human community. Because one of the things I find interesting is that it's a two edged sword. We can never forget that ultimately everything we do in the service of someone else, especially when you think about a capitalist system where I only get what I want if I help you get what you want, correct? I mean, that's how it works.
Mhm.
And we are on the cusp of potentially living in a very dystopian society where we optimize everything to the point where humanity is not important anymore. People lose jobs. How do we square this circle for ourselves around making sure that the technologies that are rapidly changing the world around us, let's set aside all the geopolitical stuff that's going on that's changing the world, but just let's look at the technology, the decoding of the human genome, the intersection of AI and the genomics and nanotechnology and material sciences advances, AI by itself and quantum computing. How do we navigate through this great unknown future that we're evolving into in a way that it actually serves us rather than destroys us?
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting 2, 3 years because I do believe that humanity is going through kind of the third renaissance. Everything is changing really rapidly and will continue to change because of AI. So the world that we know today is not going to be the same world in 2, 3 years. I really predict that in a few years, when we're going to be walking outside, there's going to be humanoids walking alongside us, helping us in our everyday needs. There's studies that show that there's going to be more agents browsing the web than there's going to be humans. There even was this mold book thing that went viral where now agents have their own social media, right? And even there's rumors that they found that now like Claude and Anthropic had emotions and had consciousness, right? So we don't know, we're on the cusp of achieving AGI where the computer is going to be, well, even now it's like more knowledgeable and has some kind of consciousness, right? Will feel the emotions that we feel. So everything will change. So what is important is that we as people stay up to date with it, right? Like don't say, "Oh, I don't know what is going on in AI." Do research every day. Go and try to learn about it. What are agentic trends? What are the latest trends? Can you learn? If you can, you are lucky because you have an LLM right now. Go to ChatGPT, go to Claude, go to u.com and just search like how can I stay up to date with the latest technology and make it your mission to at least spend an hour a week learning about what is going on. Because with every new technology that comes in, like if you look, for example, when the computer came in, right? A lot of jobs got displaced. Like typewriter was no longer a job. It used to be a job before. Um, so a lot of people lost their job because of the computer, but so many new jobs got created, right? Like humanity expanded because of technology, right? Like suddenly we were able to connect the world together. And then software engineering started happening as a role. So
Mhm.
we don't know yet what those new jobs are going to be like, but I know that there's going to be new jobs that are happening. I know that we're going to get a era of like global of expansion because of technology. It's going to help us be more productive. It's going to help us live longer with AI being able to figure out if we have any diseases earlier than humans can, with AI being able to give us exactly the medicine that we need for what we have. So I do believe that we're going to be better off in the long term, but it's going to take a few adjustments. The most important thing for you is to stay up to date with everything that is happening so that your knowledge is not deprecated and you don't fight it, right? Like if you fight it, that's another thing with life. If you fight what is happening to you, you're going to just be sad, you're going to be depressed. But if you just accept it and again, flow like the river and just learn as much as you can, um then you're going to be better off.
Yeah, there's a saying, if you resist, it persists. You know,
Exactly.
I guess Jesus had a saying that was like that. It's a resist not evil. Just
Yeah,
let it go,
let it
let it flow.
go.
So I think that's an interesting perspective. This idea of being self-educated, being a person that is constantly evolving, and that requires a degree of intellectual and emotional sovereignty that says, "Hey, I know I need to be response able to the world that's happening around me." I parse that word for a reason because it means that you are willing to accept agency. Think about like playing football. I don't know how familiar you are with American football, but you know, in American football, if a player drops the football on offense, that's called a fumble. And when somebody fumbles the football, it doesn't matter what position you play. It doesn't matter that you are not the one carrying it. It's your job, if you're there, to jump on that football and keep possession of that ball for your team, right? That's what response ableness means, is that you know that it's not my fault. Something happened, but I have a capacity to go do something about it. I should. It's kind of what you did when you exercised this idea. I'm going to create Founders Bay. You
Exactly.
know, you weren't responsible for any of that. You just decided, you chose to go do something. You took action. That's important. And then the other part of that is being account able. It means you're willing to pay the price. And clearly you've been willing to make sacrifices in your personal life, trying to keep your wheel as round as you can, but at the same time recognizing that this was something you needed to do at that time to help bring about change in the investment community for founders. Um, so that's also a very important attribute. I think that as we move forward, there are timeless things that we need to carry with us as individuals that will help us navigate this, what could be a dystopian future. I mean, it really can be.
Mhm.
We don't know yet how all these things are going to evolve. We just know they're evolving. And so, some key things, one of the key things that you mentioned that you have to do to be successful as we navigate through these times is be willing to accept the responsibility and put in the time to keep yourself educated. By keeping yourself educated, you can also be a little bit nimble and more flexible in terms of how you respond to changes, because change is happening so fast now. I'm ex-military, so a lot of the frames of reference I have around dealing with adversity and things coming at you deal with like military metaphors. And so a lot of what has to happen today is that change happens so fast. By the time something is already over the horizon and you have direct line of sight at it, it's almost too late for you to react. You almost need to know and anticipate things happening before they come over the horizon at you. So as individuals, we all have to have a responsibility to have our radar out and be looking at the edge of the horizon at all times so that we're aware of what's coming over the horizon. So we have the time to respond and adapt to the changes that are going to happen irrespective of what we do. It's going to happen, right? Deglobalization, it's happening and we're not going to stop it. So if you're in business, you better start thinking about strategic sourcing rather than just sourcing from the lowest cost, because that low cost may not be available to you a year from now or 6 months from now or tomorrow. So those are a couple things: is being nimble, flexible, being response able, account able, and being self-educated, constantly evolving. What about the emotional side of this? What kinds of things do you think we have to gird ourselves for in terms of dealing with adversity on the emotional side?
Yeah, I think the emotional side is the most complex, right? Because even though we say, okay, flow like a river, you still can't control your emotions, right? Like yesterday, I had an event, but I was really sad about a situation. So I went in the room and I was just crying nonstop, right? Like we always go, even though it appears that we're all happy, right? We all go through difficult times in life, right? But what happened in that moment is that I called a friend of mine. I am no longer married, so I don't have my partner. So I'm lucky enough to have a strong support system. And I called my friend and I told her, listen, I can't stop crying. I'm really sad. And then she walked me through it. She calmed me down. So I feel emotionally surround yourself with people that are going to be there for you, right? That when you're at your lowest, when you're sad, when you feel like the world is ending, you have somebody to call and to walk you through it. So I would say, like, figure out your support system. What helps you? Now I know that when I'm really sad, right? Going on a walk helps me feel better. Going to see the ocean helps me feel better. Calling my friends, being with them helps me feel better. So figure out a mechanism for you to cope that is healthy. And I think that's the most important thing, because a lot of people feel like, you know what, I'm being very sad, I am being stressed out, I need to numb my emotions. But the only way to get through pain is through it. You have to feel those emotions fully. If you try to numb it down, it brings you to a very, very dark place. So just accept that those emotions happen. Yesterday, I didn't try to fight the sadness. I'm like, I am feeling it. I'm not gonna try to numb it. I'm gonna go in next door and I'm gonna cry my eyes out and I'm gonna feel it. But you know what? Today I woke up and I felt way better than I did yesterday. So emotional,
So
when you're feeling
what
something, don't.
let me back up here a little bit just on this, is it because one of the things I think that's really important you mentioned is the idea that we still have to have a human connection. You mentioned that. That's something I wanted to come back to. This sense of community, this human connection. And we're actually living in a world today where we're becoming less connected. Even in a world where we're supposedly more connected in the whole world of social media, more people feel isolated, more people feel disconnected. And I think part of what you're saying is you have to make the effort to be engaged with people in a one-on-one, eye to eye, like really asking the questions about who they are and connecting with people, really understanding them at an emotional level, not just some superficial level. And that's the only way that we have the network that helps us navigate through those very difficult times when you're right. You can't suppress the emotions. You have to recognize as a human being and give yourself the grace that we all have. We're none of us are just like Superman. We're not rocks. We are emotional creatures, and we have to have the grace to recognize that in ourselves, accept it, and once we're able to do that, be willing and able to give others that same grace. You know that it's the idea of this old idea that to be a man, just suck it up and just deal with it. There's a certain amount of truth to that. That okay, yeah, you have to do that, but at the end of the day, that doesn't mean you don't recognize your own internal challenges and conflicts, that you have to deal with those because they will come back bigger and uglier the longer you keep pushing them down. So having that human connection is important. And that's something that we've lost, I think, in the last 15, 20 years in the advent of all. So I think that's a very important lesson. It's sort of like get out of your chair, get out of your office, take off your shoes, walk barefoot in the grass, go say hi to your neighbor, spend some time just being with other people and connecting. Likewise, as a leader, one of the things I find most important and things I learned, just get out of my office and walk around, go out into the warehouse and talk to the guys, ask them about their weekend. How did things go? Ask them about their kids. It may seem superficial, but in the end, it makes us much more connected as people. It builds trust, it builds confidence in others, and it enables you to view humanity in its best sense rather than its worst sense, because it's a direct connection back to you. It's a feedback loop that helps you understand, hey, we're all just people here. We're all in this together. We all have to have respect for each other. You know, you can't take anything for granted. You have to be grateful for all the people in your life, what they do, because in the end of the day, we accomplish very little on our own. It is only through others that in the long run we accomplish the greatest feats, right? So that's another very important lesson. I think you're the first one, though, that I've actually brought this out in all the conversations I've had, that there's this notion we have to have this human connection to build that emotional strength to help us get through these things. Is there any other key lesson that or idea or principle that you'd like to share that you would that would help the audience in the world we're living in today through your life experience that they need to look at deep within? Because we're asking people to do the hard work here. It all starts with you. It's all inside you first. That's the genesis of everything that goes on in your life. It starts with you. What are the other things that they might need to look at?
Yeah, I would say it starts with you, exactly like you said. Like, we are not meant to live alone, right? We're supposed to be in a tribe ever since humans existed. So I would say, like, if you if you don't have the support system, right? Like, I know how hard it is to build. It's not an easy thing to do it, but you can do it. Like, after my divorce, I lost all of my network that I had. So I had to start it from scratch. So that's where I started going to events and I started hosting events. There's always things that you could do, and there's always people that you'll find that will understand what you're going through and will give you a hand. So just put yourself out there. Don't be scared, and also remember what your north star is. And I think that's the biggest thing in emotional resiliency. If you have your own mission, if you know why you're waking up every day, why are you doing the things that you're doing, when you encounter hard times, when you encounter challenges, having that north star will help you go through them, right? Like, I know my north star. I know I was meant to be here on earth to help bring more women up, to really help change things for women, right? And I have this North Star. So anytime I go through difficulties, I know that at the end of the day, the reason I'm doing everything is to help society, like, it's to bring women up with me. So just, what is your why are you doing the things that you're doing? And if you don't know, that's okay. Spend maybe a year figuring that out, right? Because that will help you. And also, giving back will just give you this peace inside you that you're living not only for yourself but for others, and that helps you be resilient and overcome the difficulty that you will have to go through life.
So let me summarize real quick. There are three things you mentioned there: courage, know your why, and give back.
Exactly.
Very important. Those are pretty awesome bits of advice. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. I've had you on here for over an hour now. I really appreciate the time. Are there any parting thoughts that you'd like to share before we conclude this session?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to stay connected with you. At the end of the day, it's all about community. Find me on LinkedIn, and then you can subscribe to my newsletter. It's foundersbay.com, and check out our APIs at u.com. You can start with 100 free credits and you can get your API keys in just 2 steps. But yeah, stay connected with me. I would love to hear from you.
No, I certainly will stay connected. This is something on this podcast journey I'm taking. I'm building a very interesting web of very interesting people that I can share things and ideas with. And one of the things I find most interesting is that while 100% of everything we discussed today hasn't been touched on, a vast majority of these ideas have it's people coming from so many different directions, all sort of honing in on the same ideas and concepts. That it starts with you. You have to have courage. You have to be willing to be responsible, accept agency in your own life. You have to be willing to put in the work. You have to have the courage to go out and step out and take the lead role in your own life. And a lot of those things start with asking yourself some of the hardest questions, like, what is my why? Why am I here? What is going on, and why did I feel that way today when this thing happened? What triggered me to, these are hard questions, and they're not necessarily easy to answer because you've got to dig down deep into your own psyche to truly understand who you are. But talk about gaining an intimate knowledge about the most important person in your life, you. And how many people actually don't actually do that every day? That's an important thing that I think we all should do. Well, Marianne, thank you so much for your time today, your insights, sharing your life experience with us, and some of the insights that you have around what we might need to do to help us navigate some of these challenging times, which I think everybody listening to this gets it at this point. You need to enjoy the journey, right? No matter how hard the climb is, just keep climbing, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to this show. We can't tell you how much we appreciate it. Remember, the best lessons don't survive unless someone chooses to pass them on. The code you operate by today isn't just building the leader you'll be tomorrow. It's shaping the organization, the people, and the legacy that you choose to leave behind. So be intentional about it. This is the Operator's Code. I look forward to seeing you next time.